I knew the sound of bone before the pain confirmed it. One moment, I was reaching for the kettle. The next, I was on the floor. My hip screaming breath caught in my chest, a bitter cold seeping into my skin through the tile. The phone was just a few feet away. I crawled to it with shaking fingers and called Cal. He declined the first ring. I tried again. Nothing. The third time I let it ring out until it died into silence. I whispered his name like a prayer. I waited. I waited long enough for the sun to move across the wall, for the kettle to whistle and then go quiet, for my body to begin trembling from the chill that settled into my bones. It wasn't just the fall. It was the kind of stillness that makes you realize no one is coming. I thought about calling the neighbor, but I didn't even know if he was home. I didn't want to be a bother. So I lay there, face pressed to the tile, wondering if this was how it ends for women like me. Not in a hospital, not in bed, but on the floor in a house we paid off, calling for people who don't answer anymore. After 3 hours, I pressed the emergency pendant I once swore I'd never need. The paramedics came quickly, kind voices and steady hands. They carried me out while the kettle sat cooling on the stove and the porch light blinked in the wind. At the hospital, a nurse asked if I wanted to call someone. I shook my head. Family, she asked gently. No, I said. I'm all right. She nodded, but I could tell she didn't believe me. They took me in for scans, cleaned the scrapes on my elbows, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders. I stared at the ceiling and told myself not to cry. A woman like me doesn't cry over a fall, but a broken line between mother and son, that's harder to set right. 2 days passed before he showed up. It was late afternoon when Cal walked in without knocking, like always. I heard the jingle of his keys before I saw his face. He didn't bring flowers, not even a card, just a hurried glance and a thin smile. Hey, Mom, he said like we'd spoken yesterday, like he hadn't ignored every call while I was lying on the floor unable to move. How you feeling? I nodded. That was enough of an answer for both of us. He sat at the edge of the armchair tapping his fingers against his phone case. His leg bounced, his mouth opened, then closed. I waited. Finally, he sighed. Look, we weren't going to say anything yet, but Harper and I found a place. It's a fixer-upper, but it's got potential. We just need a little help with the down payment. There it was. He said it like we were discussing weather. Like the words didn't carry the weight of 3 missed calls and 3 hours on a cold kitchen floor. Just something to get us through, he added, flipping his car keys in the air and catching them again. You always said money sitting in the bank doesn't do much good. I looked at his hands. They were clean. No sign he'd carried a box or lifted a grocery bag or helped anyone into a car. Just smooth hands making smooth requests. You didn't call? I said quietly. He blinked. What? When I fell. I called you 3 times. He looked down, jaw tight. I was working. Things are hectic, you know that. I didn't nod. I didn't argue either. I thought we were past this guilt-tripping stuff, he said, smiling like it might soften the edge. I didn't smile back. I just listened. Not to his voice, but to what it lacked. He started talking about interest rates and how hard it is for people his age to get ahead. How Harper's mom had offered to help, but only if I did too. I watched his mouth move, but I didn't hear him. All I could hear was the quiet from 2 days ago. He asked if I had anything set aside. I pointed to the purse on the chair. He didn't notice the way my hand shook when I pointed to the purse. He just moved fast like someone catching a prize before it could be taken back. I watched him cross the room and open the zipper with the same confidence he used to open the fridge when he was 17. He didn't ask permission. He never has. The purse wasn't heavy, but I knew what was inside would land harder than anything I could ever say out loud. He dug around for a moment, expecting envelopes, bank papers, maybe a checkbook. Instead, he pulled out a single folded sheet of paper. I saw the shift in his face the moment he recognized it. It was a printout of his own text message. "Can't talk. Stop calling. I'm busy." He stared at it silent now. Then unfolded the second half, my handwriting just beneath the message. "This is why I won't help you." The room held its breath. His lips parted like he might laugh, but nothing came out. His fingers crumpled the paper slightly, then flattened it again. He didn't look at me. He looked at the window like maybe someone out there would give him a better version of this moment. "This was a one-time thing," he muttered. "I had meetings. I didn't know it was that serious. I didn't speak. I didn't need to." He set the paper on the table, too careful now, like it might bite him. "You're really doing this?" he asked. Over one text, I let the silence stretch, until even he couldn't pretend it didn't say everything. "It's not fair," he added quieter. I thought about that word fair, and all the ways it had been twisted to mean convenient. He stood back, ran a hand through his hair, started to pace again. "I didn't mean it like that," he said. "It was a bad day, but my fall was a bad day too." And he wasn't there. He sat back down slower this time, quieter. "I didn't know it hurt you that much." I looked at him and said nothing. For a moment he looked like a child again, caught embarrassed, unsure whether to cry or to lash out. His face twisted into something stuck between guilt and offense, as if the real betrayal was mine for showing him his own words. "Mom, you're blowing this out of proportion," he said. "You know I didn't mean it like that. People say things when they're stressed." I folded my hands in my lap. "People also reveal themselves when they're stressed." He blinked, not understanding or pretending not to. Either way, the space between us felt wider than ever. "I've always been there for you," he tried again. "Always. You know that." I didn't nod. I didn't argue. I simply let him talk, because if I had learned anything in the last few days, it was that silence doesn't always protect. Sometimes it exposes. "I used to think silence was respect," I said quietly. "I thought staying quiet meant I was giving you room to be an adult, letting you live your life without feeling like I was hovering." He frowned, a small crease forming between his brows. "But silence isn't respect, Cal. Not anymore. It's distance. It's what grows when no one calls back, when no one checks in, when a mother is on the floor and her son doesn't hear her voice." The words hung there, not sharp, not loud, just true. He looked down at the floor. "I didn't know it was serious," he whispered. "You didn't pick up," I said. "You didn't know anything." He shifted again, searching for footing. "So what now? You're not going to help me at all?" "Not even a little. I had the money," I said, letting the past tense settle between us. "More than you think." His head snapped up. "But you don't have access to it." "Not anymore." His breath caught just slightly. Enough for me to see he understood. Maybe for the first time in years. He opened his mouth to argue, but the words never formed. The knock was soft. 2 short taps, nothing urgent. Cal had already left, not in anger exactly, but with that sharp edge of disappointment people wear when they don't get what they came for. I hadn't planned on seeing anyone else. When I opened the door, Reed stood there with a small paper bag in one hand and a lopsided smile. "I figured you might not feel like cooking," he said. "It's just soup. Nothing fancy." I stepped aside without saying much, and he placed it on the counter like it was something sacred. He didn't hover or fidget, just stood still. Hands in his pockets, eyes soft but not invasive. "I saw the ambulance the other day," he added, still not looking directly at me. Didn't want to intrude. I pulled 2 glasses from the cabinet more out of reflex than decision. "Sit for a minute if you want." He did. We didn't talk about much at first. Whether his stubborn lawnmower, the old oak tree leaning too far over his garage. He spoke with the calm of someone who didn't need noise to prove they were paying attention. Eventually, I told him. Not everything, just the fall, the hours alone on the floor, how I'd finally pressed the pendant they gave me when I turned 70. He didn't flinch or gasp. He didn't offer platitudes or say things like, "You're so strong." He just nodded and said, "That must have been terrifying." It was. And for the first time, I said so out loud. "I called my son," I added. He didn't answer. Still, Reed didn't offer pity. Just a quiet presence. And that made it easier somehow to say more, to admit the parts I usually swallowed. When he stood to leave, he didn't ask if I needed anything. He didn't try to fix it. He just said, "If you ever want to walk the block, I'm around." I thanked him, and when the door closed, the house didn't feel as hollow as it had earlier. In the morning, I opened the drawer where I kept the checkbook. The drawer stuck for a moment when I pulled it. The wood had swollen from years of humidity, of being ignored. I jiggled it free, then slid my fingers past old receipts, warranty cards, and expired coupons until I found the checkbook at the back, right where I'd left it the last time I thought about giving something away. I sat at the kitchen table, tore out 3 blank checks. They were still crisp, untouched. I lit a match, held the first one to the flame, and let it curl in on itself in the sink. The second followed. Then the third. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't even a goodbye. Just a quiet act that said enough. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I just stood there with the smell of ash in the air and a sense of stillness in my chest. Something had shifted. I wasn't waiting for someone to show up anymore. I wasn't holding space for someone who never intended to fill it. That afternoon, I called my attorney, Ms. Fisher. We hadn't spoken in over a year. She remembered me right away. "I'd like to make a few changes," I said. She didn't ask why, just gave me a time. At her office, I slid the old binder across the desk and pointed to Cal's name. "Remove him from everything I said. Accounts, property, rights of access. All of it." She hesitated only for a second before nodding. "Anyone you'd like to add?" I thought about it. Then I wrote a name in block letters. Not family. Not someone with title or expectation. Just someone who showed up with soup and silence without asking for anything in return. Ms. Fisher didn't comment. She updated the paperwork, had me sign, then sealed everything neatly into a folder. As I left the office, the breeze caught the edge of my coat, and I didn't feel fragile. I felt rooted. That evening, while trimming the herbs in the backyard, I saw Cal's car slow by the curb. I heard the car door slam before I saw them. Cal and Harper walking up the path side by side, holding matching paper cups from that coffee shop she likes with the velvet chairs and expensive muffins. Harper was smiling tight like someone trying to sell something without looking like they are. "Mama Marin," she chirped like I was some treasured relative she'd been dying to see. We were just in the neighborhood. Cal followed her lead, a half smile stuck on his face. "Thought we'd stop by. See how you're doing." "I'm doing fine," I said, stepping aside to let them in. I didn't ask them to sit, but they did anyway. "We brought your favorite Harper," said, setting a cup down. "Vanilla something, right?" I nodded, even though it wasn't. I hadn't drunk that blend in years. It upset my stomach now. But I let her pretend she remembered something meaningful. They settled in like it was a social call. Cal complimented the new curtains, asked if I'd had help putting them up. Harper commented on the scent in the room, some candle she assumed was intentional. I said thank you, but didn't offer much else. They kept glancing around, eyes landing on the corner where the safe used to be, on the small shelf, where I kept the mail, on the drawer where the checkbook once lived. But I'd rearranged things. Moved furniture, cleaned house in more ways than one. So Harper said brightly, "Any plans for the rest of the year? Travel projects?" I smiled. "Just tending to the garden. I've kept busy." Cal cleared his throat. "We've been thinking of starting a family," he said. "Trying, at least." I nodded again. "That's lovely." They waited, hoping for something more. A blessing, a promise, maybe a check slipped into an envelope. I didn't offer any of those. Just refilled my water and sat back down. After a few minutes of forced small talk, they stood to leave. "We'll be in touch," Cal said. "I know," I replied. and the moment the door closed behind them, I called Ms. Fisher. 1 week later, Ms. Fisher called. Her tone was steady, efficient. She said the documents had been finalized, everything signed, recorded, and filed. There was nothing left to wait for. My home paid for with overtime shifts and quiet sacrifices. My savings stitched together from birthday checks I never cashed and groceries I bought on sale. Even the little plot of land in Georgia that Daddy left me in '82. All of it now had a new name attached, not Cal's. There was no need for a meeting. No dramatic confrontation, no envelopes left on kitchen tables. Just a quiet shift of weight, like a balance tipping without sound. It felt like a curtain had closed, but not on a performance on a chapter I didn't realize had been dragging on too long. I signed the last confirmation and slid it back into the envelope. The pen left a small smudge on my finger. I didn't wipe it off. I walked outside after the call. The afternoon light was soft, and the tomatoes needed trimming. My knees ached when I crouched, but I moved slowly, steadily. I didn't rush. I wasn't angry. That surprised me. For a long time, I thought I'd carry fury like a second coat, tight around the chest, hard to breathe under. But what I felt now wasn't fire. It was air. Reed passed by around 5, walking his dog. He gave a little wave. I waved back. I hadn't told him. I didn't plan to. He hadn't asked for anything, and maybe that's why I gave him more than I meant to. By the time the sun tucked itself behind the fence line, my hands were caked with soil and peace. That night, I slept without waking. No dreams, no racing thoughts. Just the sound of the wind nudging the windows. The next morning, Cal's name lit up my phone screen. I didn't answer. Later that day, an invitation came dinner at their place. I said yes. Not out of softness, but clarity. Reed offered to drive. I accepted. The invitation came with forced warmth, like someone extending a hand while hiding something behind their back. We'd love to have you for dinner, Mom. Just us. No pressure. I said yes, and I meant it. But I didn't go alone. Reed pulled into their driveway just before sunset. He didn't ask to come in, just helped me out of the car and waited until I reached the front step before tipping his head and driving off. Cal opened the door before I knocked, as if he'd been standing behind it. "Hey," he said, with a smile just one note too bright. Harper followed close behind, arms extended for a hug I didn't return, though I let her hold on a second longer than I needed to. The table was already set. Candles, cloth, napkins, wine glasses that hadn't seen dish soap in a while. It was a show. And I was the intended audience. "You look good," Mom Harper said, pouring something fizzy into a glass. "Strong." "Still getting around?" I replied, sliding into the seat they clearly meant for me. They asked questions between bites. "Need anything fixed around the house? You keeping up with bills all right? Still managing your accounts yourself?" I answered each one simply, "I'm good." "Yes, I am." They circled again and again, like bees too polite to sting. Waiting. Fishing. Harper complimented the earrings I wore, ones she'd once called dated. Cal asked about the old plot of land, said he'd been thinking it might be worth something now. I nodded, offered no details. The food was fine. The conversation rehearsed. They were hoping I'd open a door I no longer stood behind. I didn't tell them about the transfer. I didn't mention the paperwork, or Ms. Fisher, or the name now on the deed. I just passed the salt and asked about their work, their plans, the baby names they'd been tossing around like future investments. When dessert came, I thanked them, folded my napkin, and stood up. "I should be going," I said. "Reed's waiting." Harper blinked, and Cal's smile finally slipped. 3 days passed before Cal finally called, and each time I let the phone ring out. Not to punish him, not to make a point. I simply had nothing left to add. Whatever conversation he wanted now should have taken place long before he stood in my kitchen asking for money. instead of asking if I was all right. On the fourth morning, he drove by. I saw his car slow near the curb, then pull away. By evening, he came back. This time, he stopped, walked to the mailbox and lifted the lid. I watched from the kitchen window as he found the envelope, a plain white one, with his name written in the careful script I used when he was young, and I labeled his school folders. He stood there for a long moment before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No lecture, no accusation. Just the truth set down in ink. You didn't show up when I needed care. So, I gave care to the one who did. I imagined the way his brow furrowed as he read it, the way his shoulders tightened. He folded the letter slowly, like he didn't know what to do with the weight of it, then tucked it back into the envelope and held it against his chest. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He simply walked back to the car and drove off down the street, the envelope still in his hand. I stepped outside a little later, letting the door ease shut behind me. The evening air was warm, and the tomato vines needed tying again. Reed came around the corner of the house, carrying a glass of iced tea, the cubes clinking softly against the sides. "You were out here earlier," he said, handing it to me. "I lost track of time," I replied. He stayed beside me as I looped the twine around the next stem, steady and unhurried. The garden was quiet except for the small sounds of work, the simple rhythm of two people tending what was still growing. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something settle inside me. Not an ending, just a beginning I hadn't expected.